There was nothing about this ordinary evening on the north side of Richmond that made you think it would lead to the morning of a young girl who everyone called Nay, a girl who was very intelligent, selfless, and full of potential, living the best years of her human life as a teenager. But on the Monday of September 12, 2022, that life would unexpectedly come to an end.
This is the story of Tynashia Humphrey.
Just leaving the corner store with friends.
How many of our children do we have to bury?
I believe one life lost is too many.
Where's the love? Where's the support? Where's the caring for one another?
August 6, 2007, Tynashia Humphrey made way into the world. She would spend majority of her childhood on the north side, coming up in Gilpin Court, which is located inside the Jackson Ward district. And throughout these years, she's experienced a lot of change, just like the rest of us. And her change involved the loss of her mother at a young age. Her father was always in the picture, which more than aided her through the tremendous grief of losing a parent. So in addition to countless cousins, aunts, uncles, and friends, she also grew up with a pair of fraternal twins named Unique and Blessing. And being surrounded around that much love contributed to the person that she was destined to be. Breaking into her preteen years, she would attend Armstrong High, becoming an honor student in the process. Her talent to create pushed her toward drawing, writing her own books, stories, and even music, making her mark as she walked the halls with a contagious smile and a bubbly personality, the literal light inside a room. Unlike her peers who sat aside her in class, the lunch table, and on the bus ride home, here's where life truly begins. As we learned earlier, Tynashia moved out of Gilpin Court later in her life, and the reason for this is unknown for the moment. But she still had friends and family who she would have to leave behind, prompting her to visit the old neighborhood a lot, almost as if she still lived there. But for those of you watching that may live in another state, country, or even Richmond itself, and you're just not too familiar with the area, when you hear the name Jackson Ward or Gilpin Court, you immediately associate them with hard crime and poverty. But Jackson Ward as a whole was originally known as the Harlem of the South, due to its strong black heritage and culture. There was a time where the community's economic power was so strong that it was also nicknamed the Black Wall Street of America.
We too were Harlem of the South. We were a little Africa. We were a Black Wall Street. 1 in 4 Black Americans can actually trace their roots to the rivers in Richmond.
But in the decades after, the area was considered nothing more than a black slum, with city officials coming up with the solution called slum clearance projects, and that initiated the birth of Gilpin Court. Gilpin Court was the very first housing project built in the city, and also the biggest, with it having 780 plus units. Construction started in 1941 with its grand opening in 1943. But good intentions or not, it would only worsen, adding on the later influx of crack, which totally transformed a once thriving community to unrecognizable. But nothing lasts forever, because Jackson Ward did redevelop, got back to its roots. Until this day, among the projects that have been torn down, Gilpin Court will be one of the few that still stands.
It is more than likely named after Stonewall Jackson. But that's when we also looked at ourselves and said, okay, well then let's recontextualize it for the only Jackson worthy of the honor, and that's Giles B.
Now, just as time revitalized the district, the culture changed as well. But when social media came into play, it changed everything, specifically talking about the music scene. While hip-hop and rap styles evolved, the internet made it possible to experience all of them at once, with several artists adopting the styles of other regions. And the biggest of them all in today's time would be drill, or as some would call it in the city of Richmond, RVA drill.
Me and my niggas, we steppin' like shoes. How about the car, you gon' go on the news? Me and my glizzy, we stuck like glue. First way, got a 19, that's cool. Do what I want, I be breaking the rules.
I'm pretty sure by now we all know enough about the drill culture to not speak on the specifics. But it wasn't long before that massive wave made its way south, and it hit the city hard, giving birth to a lot of new artists who were either killed before their big break or sent to prison. And this isn't implying that drill is to blame for the uptick in shootings and murders among the young guys roaming the streets, but it does contribute in a real way.
The drill music is basically the end of hip-hop as we know it. They using drill music the same way they used the drug game back in the day. You know, it's gonna be a lot of us getting rich off of it, but it's gonna be a lot of us getting killed and being hurt from off of this stuff. These newer artists, the drill artists, they are basically telling on themselves on Instagram. It's not just in their music, it's on Instagram.
To the point where hearing about your favorite rapper being involved in a street war added to the lure of their name. It was cool to say you had ops, but it meant nothing if you couldn't prove it. Then after, they wear their prison time, battle scars, and dead homies as a badge of honor, but it only applies to a few and not the many. Like every city, Richmond too has its pick of real young gangsters who seen real war, and not because they wanted to. In their hearts, it was truly out of obligation. But depending on your age, background, environment, and how you grew up would determine your own point of view. You could choose to just adopt the style, or the style and the murderous culture it's attached to.
Saying, hey, yo, when I did it, how I did it.
We slid on them outs on 34th Street, September 3rd, 1957 at 10 a.m. Hip-hop would never die. Hip-hop is going to constantly change and evolve, but yeah, a lot of people are going to die, absolutely. There'll be a whole replenishing of the earth.
On the fall day of September 12, 2022, it's a bit chilly outside, but it wasn't cold. And Tynashia had plans to stay at a friend's house in Jackson Ward later that night, so she goes throughout her day like any other. But just a 10 minutes drive away, in the St. Luke apartment complex, formerly known as Essex Village, was a group of guys from the north side called the 30 Boys. I'm not sure on the name or what they actually go by, but from their YouTube channel, they're known as 30 Mob. And there were 5 of these young men who would have that same destination in mind. Now, over time, officers labeled them as gang members, while also being known as local rappers, with their highest viewed music video on YouTube being close to 350,000. And these quote-unquote members were identified as 21-year-old Rashard Marquise Jackson, aka Big Op, 20-year-old Tyree Marcus Coley, aka AR Sticky, 20-year-old Mitchell Hudson Jr., aka Mitch Too Rich, 23-year-old Savon DeMontre Henderson, and 25-year-old Ramil Coley Pettiford. A certain criteria has to be met in order to classify someone as being in a Richmond gang, ranging from self-admission, confirmation from an informant, displaying hand signs, hanging out in known gang areas, wearing similar clothing, and committing crimes and getting arrested with other members, which basically describes black hood culture in general. Gang or no gang, the average street guy with no gang ties have indulged in at least one, if not all of those activities.
If you the nigga up, you robbed the nigga, or you and your boys banked the nigga, in Southside, you gonna see that nigga here today. So if you get f***ed up, it's your fault, because you came here. Whatever you did to a nigga, you gonna see that nigga today. And the worst thing about it, nigga gonna be here with his whole squad, his whole hood gonna be out this bitch. This Southside.
But this gang's plans to visit Gilpin involved an ongoing beef with a specific person, and this person had intentions on going to the store located just blocks away from Gilpin Court. And for the sake of the story, let's call this person Larry, because in doing my research, she was only ever referred to as intended target throughout the court documents I could find. But before we go any further into the rest of Tynashia's day, I'd like to take you back in time a bit, so we can truly understand how and why all of these moving parts end up at the intersection of North First and Federal Streets. Now, the background on the 30 Boys and all the information obtained was through court transcripts, case files, and news articles, so my apologies in advance if any information is wrong or misleading. According to gang unit detectives, the 30 Boys started as a rap group in late 2019 and was designated a street gang in 2021. They thought of St. Luke Apartments as the common 30 Boys hangout, spending most of their days and time here because an apartment was being leased by one of the members' girlfriends. Labeling Tyree, Rashard, and Mitchell as well-known members. And Ramil, he was said to be related to Tyree, but couldn't confirm if he was an actual member. While another gang unit detective says he's known Savon since the year 2016 at the age of 16 or 17 years old. Then by spring of 2022, Savon at the time was considered a member of another gang linked to the 30 Boys, some sort of branch or subset. But that link would soon be broken after the 30 Boys member was murdered by someone rumored to be a part of the other gang that they were tight with. And this was a member that Savon was very close to. So in turn, Savon decided to leave that gang and become associated with the 30 Boys officially. The gang unit was still on the fence about him being an official member, but seeing him hanging out with them on social media labeled him as a close associate. Now, the man, Larry, I mentioned earlier in the story, would have a history with one of their members, Tyree. and Tyree would one day get into an altercation with Larry. It isn't known why or when this event would take place, but it's said to be a huge contributor for the upcoming events, kickstarting the beef between the two, and they were feuding back and forth ever since. As we get back to the current timeline, it's earlier that same day of the 12th before Tynashia takes off the Jackson ward, and a former girlfriend of Ramil would give him permission to use her vehicle, which was a light gray BMW with the vanity license plate, saying he planned on using it to go to work, along with plans on getting it clean. She had woken up that day around 6:30 a.m., being unaware he had already left. We fast forward into the evening of that day at around 6 p.m., and Tyree, Mitchell, and Savon would be outside in the parking lot of St. Luke Apartments. After a while, all three men got inside a black Hyundai sedan and would leave at approximately 6:43 p.m., making way to a BP gas station just around the corner. After arriving at the destination, Rashad and Ramil pulls up as well, driving the gray BMW that Ramil borrowed from his girlfriend. Neither of the men would exit their vehicles, with video footage showing them driving around a bit, then parking inside a blind spot away from the camera. They sat there for a brief moment before leaving the gas station and now the Gilpin Court. Tynashia has already made her way to Gilpin Court, and everything was going well as she and her friend enjoyed each other's time. Then a little after 7 p.m., she and a few friends decided to take a short walk to the Golden Eagle Market, and depending on which unit they were coming from, it would only take 10 minutes at the most to reach their destination, and Larry would either be inside the store when Tynashia arrived or came in a brief time after, but both would leave out around the same time, between a minute or so. Larry was now walking up the block towards his vehicle, which was a Jeep parked on North 1st Street, facing away from East Charity Street, at which time a gray BMW and a black Hyundai pulling into the intersection caught his attention. And without a care in the world, Tynashia and her friends still shared the sidewalk as Larry was only a few yards away. He would assume the people inside the vehicles were folks that he knew. So upon raising his hand to wave, he realized how deeply mistaken he was. Both car windows rolled down with multiple barrels pointed in Larry's direction. Taking cover behind his driver's side door, he reached for a Glock 40 tucked inside his waistband, returning fire to defend himself. And he was aware of Tynashia walking toward his direction, but wouldn't see her when she falls down. Because in the midst of gunfire, one single bullet struck Tynashia in the back. After both vehicles sped off, Larry jumps into his vehicle to do the same, adrenaline pumping, now realizing how close he came to losing his life. But for a split second, he noticed a young girl lying on the ground bleeding out, then leaving the scene shortly after. Now there's no way to tell how Larry felt in the exact moment, or if he even questioned whether he was responsible or not. But he would later say in an interview with police that he only fired up the street toward the cars in the intersection and not toward the sidewalk or grassy areas. Now after the cops were called, residents in the area would converge onto the scene, and it was said that it took police forever to get there. So by the time they did arrive with emergency services, she had already passed, pronouncing her dead on arrival. The lead detective arrived on scene within 30 minutes of getting the call, having an idea of who can be involved, but it was nothing more than speculation until they gathered some proof. But as we know, the gang unit already had the 30 boys on their radar. As all of this took place and officers worked on notifying her next of kin, it would be close to 8 p.m. when Tynashia's cousin named Jasmine and her mom had been sitting on their porch together. While her mother scrolled through Facebook threads, she come across a news post about a 15-year-old girl being shot in Jackson Ward. And because her name was yet to be released, she reposted the story without knowing her own loved one was the victim. Then moments later, a family member would call and deliver the horrible news of the girl's actual identity. If we remember, Ramil's girlfriend had given him permission to drive her car earlier that day or the day before. So when she arrived home, which was just after dark, she didn't notice if the car was there at all. But she did notice that Ramil himself was not. Totally unaware that the news about a deceased 15-year-old girl would be connected to her boyfriend. Which brings us to around 8:30 p.m., a little over an hour after leaving the scene of the crime. The shooters would travel across town to a Midlothian bowling alley. Which bowling alley is unknown, but because of Uptown Alley's popularity with the folks in the city, that might just be the best bet. So Savon, Tyree, Mitchell, and Rashad would all be seen together, with Rashad being seen talking on the phone for a period of time, and Ramil was nowhere to be found. Or at the very least, he was out of the view of cameras in the bowling alley that they were in. And they assumed their decision to come here was to establish an alibi, but it wouldn't matter, because there would be a mountain of evidence left behind. But these guys wouldn't know it.
We begin tonight with a heartbreaking story out of Richmond. A 15-year-old girl is dead after being shot while walking to the store near Gilpin Court.
Well, yeah, Eric, Deanna, the word that we hear time and time again is senseless. This was senseless. This was a 15-year-old girl, a 9th grader, who did not make it home last night. I spoke to that heartbroken family who are begging for these shootings to stop.
Caution tape lining North 1st and Federal Street Monday night, marking the latest deadly crime scene in Richmond. We're told 15-year-old Tynashia Humphrey was walking to the corner store when two groups opened fire. Humphrey, an innocent bystander, caught in the middle and died there on the sidewalk.
Now, going into the following day of September 13th, 2022, the intended target of the shooting, Larry, would be interrogated by police about yesterday's murder. Now, it's unclear if Larry decided to turn himself in or he just so happened to be arrested, because before the shooting, he had already had a warrant out for his arrest on a petty larceny charge. The detective asked if he had known who the shooters were, and he said that he thought Tyree Coley could have been the shooter because he didn't have issues with anyone else that would attempt to hurt him or possibly want him dead. Going on to tell him about their history of beef with one another, running down in detail of his own actions before, during, then after the shooting. And he couldn't say who or how many people were in either of the cars, meaning he couldn't say for sure if Tyree was in fact one of the shooters. Afterward, they requested he turn over his weapon, which was a Glock 40, but he refused, saying he'd rather not give it up just in case he needed it. He denied being afraid, but admitted he was definitely worried about his safety without it, but eventually he would give up the gun. Now, if he wasn't locked up for his previous charges in this interview, he would be arrested at some point, and he felt it was to compel him to later testify in Tynasia's murder case. He wasn't offered any sort of deal from prosecutors, but someone would reach out to them on his behalf. Now, this interview would be a key piece in finding all the shooters, and then later on that same day, they tracked down another piece of their own. On the south side of town, Ramil would still be driving the gray BMW used in the shooting. They tracked down the vehicle and placed him under arrest. Upon searching the car, they found a 9mm magazine, a .223 magazine, and a ski mask, prompting them to issue a search warrant for his house, and the dominoes would all start to fall down from there. As days passed, nobody but the police had a clue on who was behind it, and if anybody else did know, they didn't say anything about it. 2 days later, on September 15th, 2022, an officer pulled over the black Hyundai that Savon drove during the shooting. Inside the car, they found a 9mm Glock gun case and some medical paperwork for Savon. Then they placed him under arrest, at which time his phone would be seized and sent to RPD for investigation. 1 week goes by. It's September 22nd, 2022. Officers had eyes on members of the gang at St. Luke Apartments to execute a few warrants. Rashad, who was inside a car with his mother, would leave out, as Mitchell was seen getting in the back seat of an occupied sedan with the female driver. Moments after leaving the apartments, an Henrico officer pulled over Rashad and his mother first, less than a mile away from the apartments, recovering his phone during the search and arrest. And once the officer finished at that scene, he went to the other traffic stop as backup. Several police cars stopped the sedan, approaching the vehicle with their guns drawn, ordering everyone to get out. They immediately put Mitchell in handcuffs alongside Tyree, and upon searching Mitchell, he was carrying a digital scale with white powder residue around it, which caused them to release K9 dogs for a search. After the dog alerted the presence of drugs in the car, they would actually find more than they expected. Among everything they found was 3 weapons, a Glock 21, a Glock 45, and a 9mm Springfield. Then a snow white backpack with marijuana inside, another backpack with the marijuana pre-bag for distribution, and lastly, 4 cell phones inside of a tote bag. And they would of course seize everything, but what they wanted more than anything were their phones, and they too were sent to RPD for investigation. So at this time, all 5 members would finally be arrested. The evidence gathered against these boys was scary. Using GPS triangulation from their phones would place them at the murder scene. It was determined that of the 5 suspects, there were 2 drivers and 3 shooters, and they would use 2 Glocks and 1 assault rifle, recovering 357 casings, 223 casings, and 9mm casings. But after an autopsy, it was revealed that the single bullet that struck Tynashia was 38 ammunition. Then investigators recovered another 38 bullet lodged in the back hatch area of Larry's Jeep. Now, the forensics investigator would say that 38 bullets are compatible with 357s and 9mm, but they are not compatible with the .40 caliber, which was the same caliber used by Larry. with that alone proving who accidentally killed Tynashia. You top it off with the touch DNA evidence found from both vehicles, a witness who saw gunfire coming from the front passenger side of the BMW, and if that wasn't enough, there was also video footage capturing the entire murder.
On this case, there are two suspects that are on trial currently, 24-year-old Savon Henderson and 21-year-old Tyree Cooley. They both pled not guilty for shooting and killing 15-year-old Tynashia.
By June of 2023, it came time for trial. Larry was given written promises from the state and federal level that what he said on the stand would not be used against him in the future, agreeing to testify as a witness. Tyree and Savon's trial were first, and they say they felt for the loss of Tynashia, but yet and still maintained their innocence. The prosecutors made the case that Savon should not serve more time than Tyree, based on his role as just being the driver and not one of the shooters, versus Tyree, who was. But the sentencing guidelines were much higher for Savon due to his criminal history. Tyree's lawyer would ask the judge to reconsider, and when it was time for sentencing, the judge did, in fact, decide to go beyond Tyree's guideline, saying because of Tyree's lack of remorse and the egregious nature of the offense. Ultimately, Tyree Cooley and Savon Henderson received 56 years each in the Richmond Circuit Court following a multi-day trial. Then the trial for the last three would end the same, but had a slight difference in prison time, with Mitchell Hudson Jr. being sentenced to 25 years, Rashard Jackson 20 years, and Ramir Pettiford 15 years. The ACA would comment on how ironic and eerie it was because the sentencing happened exactly 1 year after a community march was held to denounce violence in the city. And among the crowd were parents, family members, and community leaders walking from the spot where Tynashia was killed to the steps of the courthouse. The United Communities Against Crime Executive Director Charles Willis would speak on Tynashia, saying, and I quote, "Her physical body is separated, but her life and spirit will live on with all of us in the city of Richmond." You know, I didn't find this out until doing research on Tynashia. Just back in April of this year, a 15-year-old girl named Dora Hill, she was shot and killed on the very same street or intersection as Tynashia. Now, these were two totally different circumstances. From what I hear, it was her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend who did this to her during an argument. But I won't speak too much on it because I'm not really sure and I haven't talked to her people. But how eerie is that? Whole time I'm thinking this is Nay's story, but I'm reading something totally recent. So my condolences to her family as well, and also to the other families who lost kids around this same time back in 2022, like 17-year-old Samaya Yelady, who I've already covered, died in a home invasion, 16-year-old Jaheim Dickerson, who was killed in an attempted robbery, and then Tynashia Humphrey, killed in Crossfire. But you want to know why these stories are more important than most? Because this was an innocent life who was not involved, living a normal, happy life. And if somebody told you that because two guys got into it 6 months ago, a year ago, or 5 years ago, that you would lose your life on the day of September 12th, 2025, of course you wouldn't see it coming. She couldn't either. But all while knowing we could die just because we left home that day, your kids, our kids, those young black children multiply them chances every day. I guarantee you that you know somebody right now, a brother, a cousin, a homeboy, who just recorded a song dissing the dead, who told you about that quick lick he trying to hit, who posted a picture on IG mocking his ops, who you witnessed put his hands on his girlfriend, threatened to kill her even, who told you not too long ago that he got shot by them same young niggas who supposedly ain't on shit. Because if you do know, you are aware, and you ain't did shit to prevent it, you are just as guilty. Brainwashed with this mythical street rule of no snitching, a rule that don't even apply to most of us. Then the motherfuckers y'all put on the pedestal don't even uphold those same rules. But there you go, right there at the funeral, at the repast, you chilling with the family members of the victims, knowing you could have did something, but being a real nigga was too important. Being a stepper was at the top of your priorities. But you know what? I'm tripping. I want to give a big thank you to Jasmine, the cousin of Tynashia Humphrey, for helping me out with this story, giving me the information I needed, and my condolences to you and your family. Rest in peace to the fallen, and y'all stay safe out there.